According to sociologist Malcolm Gladwell, the equation for greatness is a natural aptitude plus a minimum of 10,000 hours of effort. This type of egalitarian thinking influences the way we raise our children, to believe that if they work hard and play by the rules, then success is more or less guaranteed. But what happens when you've put in way beyond 10,000 hours and played by the rules, but then the rules of the game are changed? Two-time Olympic champion Caster Semenya found herself faced with exactly this when it was announced last week that she had lost her appeal against the International Association of Athletics Federations, who had ruled that female runners with hyperandrogenism, i.e. naturally occurring high testosterone levels, must take medication to suppress it in order to compete in certain events. Such discriminatory practices are not forced upon male athletes who have natural physical advantages. Take Michael Phelps, whose uniquely shaped body allows him to cut through water faster. Sadly, when it comes to policing bodies, in sport, just as in society, the women are the victims.
This might surprise the viewers, but I've never competed at the Olympics as, as an athlete, a swimmer, a horseman or a horsewoman. To the best of my knowledge, June Sarpong, neither have you.
No.
So let's turn to someone who has and bring in Sharon Davis.
Yep.
I do 100% sympathise, and I do understand, and I do believe we have to find ways round for both intersex athletes and for transgender women athletes as how they can be included. But we also have to work out how can we protect women's sport, because if we're not careful, in 10 years' time, all the world records will be held by men in the men's races, and all the world records in the women's races will be held by people who have a Y chromosome.
And rather than bang on and repeat what she says, she's broadly right. I have enormous sympathy for Caster Semenya. I thought the way she reacted to the decision showed such dignity and grace, and credit to her. Your analogy with the swimmer Phelps is not fair because he's competing against other men. This woman has the condition known as DSD, and if, as Sharon Davis says, if you were a runner and you were constantly beaten by Caster Semenya, or you're a young woman who wanted to compete against Caster Semenya, you're going to be disenfranchised, discouraged, just disenchanted with your opportunities. And she's right. Ultimately, there will be no female records. She must be allowed to compete. She needs her own classification, as do others with conditions similar.
I completely disagree with you. You know, I would love to compete against our 100-metre sprinters, but sadly I find myself not having the same physique as them. All elite athletes, by definition, have elite physical advantages. It's totally different from the transgender debate.
Totally
and
different.
It annoys me when people conflate the two. No, but in the grab that we had,
she conflated
the two. This is not someone who's chosen to transition. This is somebody who is a woman who has high testosterone. Male elite athletes.
Has testes.
Male elite athletes have higher than average testosterone levels.
She does. So that is what contributes to her power. It's a fact.
I want to define
it, and then I'll come back in.
If I were an Olympic javelin thrower right now, Nick, I'd be aiming for your foot. OK, let's define the syndrome that you refer to. It's called AIS, and it's caused by a genetic fault that's usually passed on to a child by their mother. Now, the word fault isn't my wording, just to make that clear. Despite being genetically male, the body doesn't respond to testosterone properly, and male sexual development doesn't happen as normal. The penis doesn't form or is underdeveloped, which means the child's genitals may appear female or between male and female. However, they don't have a womb or ovaries and have fully or partially undescended testicles. I want to say, after looking at this, I was right. Well, partially or... but after looking at this, I want to say that I really thought hard about this, and I come down on your side, June.
Yes.
First thing I'd like to say is this isn't the same as the transgender debate.
I didn't say it was June.
You didn't. Second thing I'd like to say is, Phelps, I love that analogy. It's what swung me. It's what did it for me. Because what viewers may not know is that Phelps has a wingspan, as in if he does that, of 6'7". I mean, like, 6'7". I mean, that's just subhuman or superhuman, right? The other thing is he produces half the lactic acid of you and me. Well, probably not me, but you. Okay? So, which means, what does that mean, the lactic acid? acid, half the lactic acid produced in the body,
Less
because it's the
fatigue.
lactic acid that your muscles build up when you work out that makes you tired. It's that kind of strain feeling you get in your muscles. If he's producing half of that, it means he's getting tired less, and
So
he
he
can go on for longer.
double the length of
Now,
everybody
why is
else.
that fair,
against
June?
other
Why
men.
is it fair? If I compete against him, I might be. And when you said, but he's still competing in the male category, the point is this: there isn't a binary. There's a spectrum. If I've got less of all of those things than him, then maybe I'm closer to a woman.
Please, before I bring Michelle in, and just to say, in terms of whether or not she's a woman, the athletics body themselves classified her as a woman. Don't forget, this thing's been going on since she started in sports. And the poor woman had to undergo horrific testing to prove that she actually was female. And that was decided. So as far as I'm concerned, it's done.
Which is
Case
why it's
closed.
problematic for you to swan in, Nick, and talk about her
testes.
your
and
imagined
goodness,
version of her testes, and
Javelins.
say she's not a woman.
Go on, Michelle. Michelle.
I think, first of all, this is such a complicated discussion, because it's not black or white, and it's really...
And
got
it's not
so
the
much...
trans argument.
No, I didn't say it was.
No, I'm not saying you are.
And
but I'm
I
saying.
almost feel awful talking about somebody in this way as though like they're some kind of commodity. But for me, women's class in these kind of events was set up because, you know, if I was to go head-to-head with my male equivalent, he is going to have... unless it's Nick, he's going to be stronger than me. He's going to have more. He's going to have more.
Nick alone.
I'm sorry, Nick. He's going to have more power about him. He's going to have more strength about him, probably based on his physicality. So therefore, we had to set up a separate class for women so that we weren't disadvantaged in terms of competing for men, or else we'd hardly ever win.
But using that criteria, she underwent all of the tests necessary, because don't forget, in the early days of sports, they actually used to test people to see whether they were male or female. And then that stopped in the 60s. But my point is, using the criteria that they have in place to determine whether you're male or female, they did, and she passed the female test. That's it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but then, I mean, I could be mistaken, isn't it? So you have to look at how that's defined, and I think that you said, Nick, or someone said, or maybe I've just got it in my own head, if we're looking at levels of testosterone and X and Y chromosomes, and someone is found to have increased levels of testosterone, surely there can be and a Y chromosome, there can be no disputing that that person has a physical advantage.
As does Michael Phelps.
Yes, but Michael Phelps, for example, if he's got long arms, he's got long arms. As I understand it, in this particular case, you can do a situation where you can reduce the levels of testosterone down to make a more even playing field.
So you're saying we should change her because you can, but we shouldn't change someone like Michael Phelps
What
because
are you going to do? Chop his arms off?
Well, exactly.
No,
physically.
Why are
It's
you
not just his
forcing
arms,
a
it's the
woman
lactic acid.
to
So
reduce
should he
her
be
natural
injected with more?
testosterone? To me, that is incredibly intrusive.
Or should we increase the lactic acid in Michael's...
I'm just going to show you what the panel...
do you think she's got an unfair advantage?
I'm just going to show you what the panel said. They would kind of agree with you.
She's naturally talented.
Michelle.
Does that give her an
Can
unfair
you just listen to
advantage?
Mathieu Reeb explaining why they decided that she couldn't compete as she is?
The panel found that the DSD regulations are discriminatory, but the majority of the panel found that on the basis of the evidence submitted by the parties in the procedure, such discrimination is a necessary, reasonable and proportionate means of achieving the IAAF's objective of preserving the integrity of female athletics in some track events.
I think we're going to look back
Shocking
on this
in
as
2019.
such a regressive stance that we try to change the woman to meet our idea of the rules instead of change the rules.
Just
Change the
one
definition.
moment, and I want to say one thing. Don't forget, this is the same thing. Not quite the same, but very similar that they did to Surya Bunali. Do you remember the figure skating champion who was able to complete lots of tasks that nobody else could do, and as a result, they penalised her because she was better than everybody else.
And I want to
no way should we be doing this now.
A question Michelle asked, because I think the analogy to the arms isn't as accurate as the analogy to the lactic acid. What we wouldn't do is say to Phelps, you've got to have an extra dose of lactic acid just to make it fair that other men
You give Caster Semenya her own... Sharon Davis, who respectfully... Well, I don't know, but Sharon Davis knows more about competition than any of us five.
She conflated it's transgender
move that to one side. Otherwise, all the women's records will be meaningless.
Sharon Davis might just be jealous?
But
because
she was a swimmer.
No, but my point is, if you are a runner against this woman who keeps on winning, there is a level of envy that's going to arise, and perhaps that's influencing the way somebody like Sharon Davis thinks.
Create a level, fair playing field as much as possible.
But there isn't one.
This race has been run